Well, Donald Trump has upped the ante when it comes to the steel and aluminum tariffs. And as a result, of course, the cars that take all of the steel and aluminum. Of course, the liberal brain trust is all over it. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name's Sterling. Most of you will be aware of the corporate media and the Liberal Party trying to blame Donald Trump for all of our economic woes, even though we had all of these woes before Donald Trump even won his second term, and that the Liberal Party that is currently trying to blame Donald Trump was the one that brought on the woes. Of course, Donald Trump upped the ante because he wants to look after his own country, unlike the Liberal government who thinks Canada should just be, providing all of their resources to other countries or other places on earth and not looking after our own self. So on the weekend, Donald Trump secured a $14 billion investment in steel in the United States of America from Japanese investment. At the same time, he announced that he was going to be doubling the tariffs. Now, the Liberal government is in no way, shape, or form being able to handle the 25% tariffs despite all of their elbows up claims. We all know that they quietly didn't try to put any tariffs on anything coming in from the United States at all. Now that the 50% tariff has been announced, everybody's asking the Liberals, hey, what have you been doing? What have you been up to? Donald Trump made the announcement January, and it's now June. What's going on here? Of course, they have a lot of slogans and a lot of rhetoric, but they don't have any answers. And that lack of answers is, of course, starting to really magnify itself. So we'll start at the beginning in the House of Commons. There's a couple of clips from yesterday when they were desperate to try to convince you that Donald Trump's claims were not signed yet. Then they'll say, oh, Donald Trump, he's erratic. Well, he's made an announcement right out loud and he's going to be doing it. And your only reaction is to say, well, it's not done yet. Anyway, we'll start in the House of Commons because don't forget, right, the economic woes of this country are supposed to be tackled by the Liberal government. And then there's the big three, right? There's Carney, there's the finance minister of Champagne, and the industry science minister of Jolie. So let's hear what some of them have to say.
On elbows up, promising dollar for dollar tariffs on the U.S. and promising this would generate $20 billion in revenue. It turns out it was actually elbows down, and the Prime Minister broke his promise and secretly canceled those tariffs. Now Trump is threatening 50% tariffs on Canadian steel, which will devastate Canada's steel industry and put thousands of steel workers out of their jobs. Can the Prime Minister look steel workers in the eye, tell them it wasn't actually elbows down, and how much money his tariffs will actually generate?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Clear in this House and the Prime Minister, we will fight, Mr. Speaker, against these unjustified and illegal tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminium, Mr. Speaker. We're going to protect our workers and our industry, and the Minister of Industry already spoke about that over the weekend. And we're going to build a strong Canada, Mr. Speaker. We're going to build a Canada of tomorrow, a confident Canada, a prosperous Canada, a Canada that we can all be proud of, Mr. Speaker.
Now you see the biggest problem with the Liberal government. They were asked a direct question and they didn't answer the question at all. Now, where I come from, when I was growing up, in the world that I was raised in, when you don't answer a direct question, you're only one thing. And that is full of, because he said, oh, she spoke about it over the weekend. Let's hear that pearl of wisdom.
First and foremost, we take note of the announcements coming from the White House. Of course, these are announcements, and we will see whether they will become an executive order. Meanwhile, we're preparing scenarios. Three things. First, we will make sure that in national projects, Canadian steel and aluminum is used. Second, we will build a defense industry in this country that will rely on Canadian steel and aluminum, creating therefore jobs. And thirdly, we will diversify our trade, making sure that we can create jobs by partnering with other countries.
There are so many things wrong with what she said in there. I almost want to laugh. But first, it's like, oh, well, he hasn't signed it yet. I'm not even sure he has to sign it. I'm pretty sure he just has to go back to the other order and up it. I don't know. But I think that's just I think we're just being semantic. I don't think that it matters one way or the other. It's a safe bet it's going to 50%. But they're preparing scenarios. He signed his first executive order on this problems in January. And here it is 6 months later or 5 months later, depending on which way you want to count your days. I'm not going to split hairs over it. I'm only going to say that the Liberal government has done nothing. Not a single preparation. Then she says some of the silliest things I ever heard in my life. So first, we're going to make sure that infrastructure projects are done with Canadian steel. I don't know how you're supposed to make sure of that, because the project is going to be bid on the costs, and the individual doing the project can get the steel less expensively in America. So that's one thing. Then we're going to make sure that the military uses steel and aluminum. You notice how she didn't mention the cars, right? But the military, again, is a procurement. So somebody manufactures the product and then the government bids on it, or they approach them and say, build us something specifically. And then we're going to be partnering with the world again. You know, the one thing that I hate that they overlook, or like I wish they would just stop pretending that we're not listening. When the whole wide world is partnering with the United States, right? We seem to be the only people who are not partnering with the unbelievable. It's just, this is a sad state that we're I shouldn't be laughing. You're right, because it's coming, right? There's a problem on the way, especially now when you can see once you hear the lack of activity that's coming out of Mark Carney, you're really going to understand just how bad things are going to get. But Melanie Joly was also in the House of Commons today, so she had something to add to this, and I think we should let her say it.
Doesn't matter which Liberal stands up to answer a question in this Parliament or last Parliament. They just actually never answer a question, Mr. Speaker. And it's not complicated. Elbows Up was dollar for dollar tariffs. Has the Prime Minister already broken his promise to steelworkers, or was Elbows Up simply just fake news? And now we're facing the Trump tariffs, and steelworkers from coast to coast to coast are in serious jeopardy of losing their jobs. It's a simple question. How much money from these quote-unquote elbows up tariffs have they generated?
The Honourable Minister of Industry.
There's a lot of anxiety across the country, particularly when it comes to the steel and aluminum sectors. That's why over the weekend I've been in contact with industry leaders as well as union leaders. And we will continue to make sure that we protect their jobs. In order to be in solution mode, Mr. Speaker, we will make sure that Canadian steel and aluminum is used in our major infrastructure projects.
Oh, we're doomed. I can't believe these people got elected again. I mean, they did say elbows up, and they did say dollar for dollar tariffs, and then they turned the tariffs off, and we can talk about all of that. What I want to understand is how talking to the union leaders and expressing that there's anxiety and that you're going to use Canadian steel and infrastructure projects. Well, Donald Trump is making deals with Japan. He's making deals with Saudi Arabia. He's making deals with Ukraine. He's made so many deals. It's about $12 trillion, not just countries. He's making deals with Apple. He's making deals with all the car manufacturers. I believe it's easy to see that Melanie Joly is way out of her depth. All three of them are out of their depth. Let's listen to some of the things that came out of the First Minister's meeting yesterday. The Ontario Premier and the Saskatchewan Premier got together in anticipation of what was happening today with the Premier's meeting or the First Minister's meetings.
It's never been more important to do this. Together, we need to build a more competitive, more resilient, more self-reliant Canadian economy. And then we have to diversify across the world, not relying on the United States.
I just wish they would stop trying to convince you that they're going to be diversifying across the world. We have to go with Canada first. We have to go in baby steps. We have a lot of things that we need to take care of inside of this country that will generate enough of an economy, that will generate enough of a economic improvement. Stop talking about the rest of the planet. Let's just stay focused on what we see and what's happening right now.
Well, it's concerning. Every time he wakes up, the story changes, the deal changes. It's one person that wakes up every morning and decides what the world is going to do for him. Well, I'm sorry. When you take on the world, it comes back at you. I can assure you that. But we're going to make sure we have a strong economy. We're going to buy Canadian. We're going to manufacture here.
So you hear the term, the theme coming out of these three politicians, right? Whether it be Champagne, whether it be Jolly, or whether it be Ford. We're gonna. It's not that we are doing something. It's not that we have initiated issues and solved problems from 2 years ago. It's we're gonna. We're thinking about it. We're going to try to do, because they're just reactionary. They have no idea how to solve this problem. They have no idea how to get out in front of it. They just want to tell you something so that they can try to reassure your confidence, because they think somehow that's going to alter the grumbly and your tumbly, right? They really believe that if you're confident, you'll be able to go hungry and homeless and watch as hyperinflation rips through the country. And then you'll be begging Donald Trump for assistance. All three of them will be. Because they don't have an idea, no plan, and no ability to problem solve. We need problem solvers now more than ever.
Tins, be it Coca-Cola or Pepsi or Molson's or Labatt's and everything else, a private label one, small breweries. We ship the aluminum, it goes down to the U.S., gets dinged by 25%. They convert it and print it, and they ship it back up. Well, you know, as I've told senators down there, this is the most foolish thing that President Trump could ever do, because guess what? We're bringing a can manufacturer to Ontario, and they're going to lose $1 billion worth of business. And when they start laying people off, well, then they're going to wake up. And by that time, it's too late. They're losing the can market, because we will give incentives to companies to bring, you know, their production into Ontario and produce cans. And again, that's over $1 billion. And then tin that the Fasco makes. The vast majority of that tin goes to California to form and print and get shipped back to Ontario. A good example are Primo, the pasta cans, and that's just one out of many.
Well, Mr. Ford, there's so much wrong with what you just said there, and I don't even know how to tackle it, like from which angle to come at it. So I'll just say it in the first, you send this aluminum down to the United States, and you're gonna give incentives to a tin manufacturer, an aluminum can manufacturer, depending on which terminology you want to use, whether they make beer, whether they make soda, whether they make whatever they make out of aluminum. In the first example, it was aluminum. Then he switched over to tin for, you know, Primo, like, which is a spaghetti sauce, or I would imagine any of the vegetables that get canned. So these can manufacturing outfits are very large. They take up a lot of square footage because there's a lot of conveyor belts. It's miles of conveyor belts, and it's a lot of stamping, and it's a lot of, you know, pulling. There's a lot of washing. And I want to understand how come it is that we have been for years now sending these raw materials down into the United States for them to manufacture our cans, only to have the company that's purchasing the cans give the money to the United States, because we have the raw material and we have been sending it into the United States for the value added stuff, right? We take the aluminum in a spiral or in a roll, you know, tons of it, and we give it to a company that's purchasing it down in the United States of America for value added. This is exactly what Pierre Poilievre was saying. Instead of having somebody inside of our own country, oh, wait, you know why? Because they don't like the environmental regulations that go along with it. Because the government regulations of the Liberal government, especially in Quebec, you don't even want to know the amount of regulations that you have to put up with in Quebec. So obviously it's just easier to go south of the border and manufacture the product and then sell it back at a premium to the very place that it was pulled out of the ground. Now, as you and I as Canadians need to realize that it doesn't matter. These regulations are ridiculous. They're put in place for many different reasons. They're not going to be dumping it directly into the water, and they're not going to be dumping it directly into the soil. I think we need to let the rest of the regulations just slip to the wayside. Now, I know most of the watchers of the Canadian Shield are completely with me on this. We need to manufacture, we need to produce, we need to do everything inside of Canada. Now we have the whole day going with Donald Trump having made the announcements and then completely ignored everything else. And of course, we saw the Liberals scramble that I've shown you, and then Doug Ford trying to act like he's a big toughy tough. Then the First Minister's meeting happens, and Mark Carney, who's in the room with Danielle Smith is asked a question about some of the developments, because he's coming away from this, we're going to build a project. The idea is that everybody had to come forward with an idea, and he's going to go back to Ottawa and decide which one he's going to approve. The arrogance and the contempt for the Canadian people is so profound. You could cut it with a knife, as the expression goes. What I don't like about Mark Carney's answer, and I'm going to let it go from the question to the answer, and then you'll watch Danielle Smith shred him. I didn't have a lot of questions for it because I'm trying to show you the timeline, but I did leave this one in because she just tears him to pieces. What I don't like about Mark Carney's answer is as he has the unmitigated gall to mention Tidewater.
There seems to be growing consensus in support of pipelines carrying bitumen east, west, probably north as well. Is the federal government at this point considering pipelines a project of national significance, and will you be sidestepping certain environmental requirements outlined in Bill C-69 to fast track such a project?
Well, the first thing to say is, and let me be a bit more specific, if I could, because and I will defer to the premiers to add, but the Western premiers and the premiers of the territories met and supported an approach. The Western Corridor, the Western and Arctic Corridor, effectively a corridor between port to port to port, from Pacific Northwest to James Bay to Grays Bay Point, and within that are opportunities in energy, critical minerals, and well beyond. And specifically within energy, opportunities, yes, for an oil pipeline to get to Tidewater. Now, within the broader context of national interest, the interest is in, as mentioned in the press release, decarbonized barrels. So working alongside forms of decarbonization for those barrels. That is absolutely in our interest. It provides diversification of trade partners. It provides the development of new industries. It provides economic activity across the west and into the north. So yes, there's real potential there. We took up a good deal of our time in discussions and potential to move forward on that. And if further developed, the federal government will look to advance it.
Let's call it the grand bargain, that we know that there is a group of oil sands companies that have been advocating for some time for what they call the Pathways Project, that would decarbonize the production of their bitumen through the use of carbon capture, utilization, and storage, ultimately using hydroelectric or small modular nuclear to decarbonize, and then direct air capture for the last mile. I think the point I was making to the Prime Minister and my colleagues is that there's lots of ways to decarbonize, but the Pathways Project is an expensive project. It would cost anywhere from $10 to $20 billion to get built. And to make the economic case for that, having more egress with more barrels to be sold to Asia is the way to pay for it. If we had a 1 million barrel a day pipeline going to the Northwest BC coast, that would generate about $20 billion a year in revenues. And so that seems like a pretty good value proposition if both of those projects can proceed at once.
So what you heard him say there was a bunch of stall tactic, right? He tried to answer the question with vague and sort of mysterious answers, right? Well, we're talking about it, and you know, when he talks about the Western Premiers meeting, they got together with 3 of the Northern Premiers, right? So Northwest Territory, who were all in the room, right? And then I believe the British Columbia Premier is currently in China. However, he was there at the Western Premiers meeting. So that's 4 provinces and 3 territories who all got together and said, we want this. Now, I don't agree with them sending it into James Bay. James Bay is in Quebec, and it's got a massive development already. It's got a hydroelectricity dam there that provides most of the top half of the United States with all the electricity that Quebec sends down in there. But I do believe that we should be developing Churchill. I do believe that we can drop a deep water port in Churchill. I do believe that that's a smart idea, and it will serve the Nunavut corridor a lot better. They will then be able to gather development up into that part of the country. Now, Scott Moe, what I didn't show you is Scott Moe when he was talking with Doug Ford, he talked about how Saskatchewan would be best served by a railroad. And as I was saying to you from the very beginning, because I have thought my way through this, though a lot of people talk at me like I don't know what I'm talking about, I understand these sections. I have seen them. I've traveled them, and I know that by putting a magnetic levitation train up there alongside the pipeline in this exact corridor that they're talking about, we now touch everybody's needs. We solve the problem. We unlock the interior of the continent. We develop the northern part of the continent, which is all Canadian. We spread out the people. We spread out the money, and we start to do the things that we've been all dreaming about when we look down at the United States and say, geez, I wish I had that kind of prosperity. When we watch American television and we think we understand, what the middle class lives like. I don't believe for one second that Mark Carney is ever going to develop Tidewater. I don't believe for one second, because you hear him with the low carbon, and you hear Danielle Smith say, no, we have a way to solve the carbon problem, but you're not willing to listen to it. And it's like I told you, because they're not being reasonable. They're not reasonable people. They have this narrow-minded approach to just about everything. And if you don't fit into their little narrow-minded approach, it's not that they're narrow-minded, it's that you're the problem somehow. Mark Carney's stall tactics, and the Liberal Party stall tactics have been going on now for years. Tidewater itself was like 2018. It's 2025. They haven't even put a single shovel in the ground. What are you waiting for? However, we do have a golden opportunity to build a magnetic levitation. And a train is more important to Saskatchewan because grain is heavier than oil. Oil flows down a pipeline, but grain does not. So we can, or at least not to my knowledge. So if he puts it on a train, he can move it around, and then he can move it to the boats that are actually in the deep water port that we were going to build, which gives infrastructure projects of building a deep water port. It's a big operation, takes a lot of stuff, and then we have people that we need to staff it. However, and I know I'm throwing a lot at you because I'm trying not to make this video go too long. I'll talk about it more in more videos. How in this one, I just wanted to show you how Mark Carney is stalling, and that Danielle Smith has her ducks in a row. She knows what she came to say, and there's $20 billion a year just on her idea alone. Never mind what can come out of Saskatchewan. Never mind. And if we take that $20 billion and spread it around in even just half of the projects that I just mentioned, you're talking about a lot of jobs. You're talking about a lot of prosperity. You're talking about a lot of really nice middle-class lifestyles for generations to come.
There will be review. The projects, we discussed a number of projects today. They're in various stages of preparation. They're in various stages of preparation. I think there's a shared understanding based on our discussion of the main criteria for consideration. I listed them. They're in the communique. I'm not going to repeat them given interest of time. We will work with project proponents on assessing projects relative to those criteria. As those criteria are increasingly well understood, in the national interest, Indigenous participation, example, advancing clean energy, material benefits to Canadians. As those are increasingly well understood, building the resilience of Canada, strategic economy of Canada, autonomy of Canada, more projects will come forward. It's not like the gate doesn't come down all of a sudden. Projects will also fall by the wayside because they won't necessarily meet all those criteria. It's a living list. But what's being clear is what's being put in place, or what is being proposed, will be proposed in legislation, is the ability of the federal government to devote the right resources to these projects, to make quick decisions about those projects that respect our environmental responsibilities, other responsibilities.
First and foremost, let's talk about the criteria that he was loath to mention in answering his question. It's here in the statement. I have it. There are 5 of them. Strengthen Canada's autonomy and resilience and security, which is pretty vague. Offer undeniable benefits to Canada and support economic growth. I mean, at this point, a lemonade stand would develop economic growth. Have a high likelihood of successful execution. Again, that's so vague. Have a high priority for, he says, Indigenous leaders, but I'll say First Nations leaders. Have clean growth potential, such as the use of clean technology and sustainable practices. Well, now we come to it. Who threw that on the end? I don't see how the First Minister sat down and agreed to that. That sounds like something that is on the agenda of only a very few people in government. And how that last one really kind of throws off the third one, a high likelihood of successful execution, pretty strongly. Because Mark Carney is getting very desperate. His very reputation relies on the outcome of his prime ministerial execution. Don't forget, He's a businessman, and reputation matters to him. Businessman reputation matters, which is why you're seeing him look a little haggard, because he knows that he is not going to be able to keep what he said he was going to do. And that might not bother a guy like Champagne or a person like Joly, but it's going to bother a guy like Mark Carney, because his friends are not politicians. They're not that kind. They see the damage that he's already done in Britain, which tarnished his reputation. And now this collapse of his ability to do anything against Donald Trump will only finish it off, in my opinion. The criteria, number 5, makes the rest of them impossible. We're not going to be saving ourselves by worrying about what's going on with carbon. He says, well, we have an obligation. We have an obligation to get our people into a proper standard of living. I promise you, the poorer people become, the more hungry they become, the less they were going to care about anything, including law and order. But Mark Carney is not able to understand that. He's never been down in the trenches. He's never been down, he's never actually had his sleeves rolled up or gone elbows up or any of that. He just talks a big talk because he read it in a book somewhere, and his book values is his main motivator. We have a carbon intense product. We have people willing to try to solve the issue, but when you put the stop on all of it and then try to tell ourselves that it's a living list and that we're going to be able to move things on and off it, that's all stall tactic. You've been at it 6 months now since Donald Trump made his announcement, and you've done nothing. You've been claiming this problem for 10 years, a full decade, and you still have done nothing. You made a housing accelerator fund, didn't make a single house. You made an infrastructure bank, didn't make a single thing. I mean, the amount of things that you have not done would fill another book. I think that Canadians need and deserve to have these projects implemented now, not 2 years from now. Think of the idea that he's going to take this list back to Parliament, then he's going to take the summer off, then he'll come back in late September, early October and say, okay, now we're going to get together to have a committee to talk about talking about it, while we all decide what's on the list we're going to keep and what we're not going to keep. It'll be 2030 before this guy decides on anything, and he's not going to decide on any project that's going to improve the standard of living for the bulk of the country. He's not worried about the middle class. He's only worried about his class. I mean, that's obvious, no? Because if he was worried about the middle class, he had to come away from this meeting and said, look, we're going to start this one. We're going to figure out how I can get it through legislation tomorrow. I got a guy speed writing it right now. And then I'm going to try to get the Conservatives to sign it right now. And we'll get it up and running by the end of July. But instead it's, oh, no, whoa. We got to talk about talking about it so that we can have a meeting to talk about talking about it. We'll have a meeting so that we can set a meeting and make sure everybody's calendar matches. Then at that meeting, we'll talk about what we are going to talk about at the next. I mean, I'm not feeling very inspired.
Let's not forget that President Trump has declared an economic war on every single business, every single person in this country. And we need to do everything we can to fight against him. Again, what the Prime Minister said, and I agree, an illegal trade war. And I think the president's going to have a rude awakening. We're going to unleash our strengths, and that's be it mining, the pipelines across the country, infrastructure, roads, bridges, highways, and specifically the road to the Ring of Fire.
Come on. Ford, man. It's not Donald Trump's fault that you can't figure out how to save the economy of Ontario. You don't even have to worry about the entire country. You just have to worry about Ontario. And your only answer is to point to Mark Carney and say, I agree with Mark Carney. And then for some reason, the man that just said to you, we're going to decide what one project can come on and off our living list, and we're going to be talking about it 6 months from now when we sit down again in the fall, is you point to him and say, yeah, we're going to do infrastructure, we're going to do mining, we're going to do all of these things. You both campaigned on the same promise of solving Donald Trump. But the problem is that I don't agree that his trade war is illegal, and neither does most of the International Trade Organization. I don't believe that he has to. That's like saying to yourself, okay, my wife is divorcing me, but she has to cook dinner for me, and if she doesn't, it's illegal. He doesn't have to take trade from us. There's nothing about our product that he must take. It's astounding in my head that he says 51st state and you guys lose your mind about sovereignty. And then you say that he has to take our product like he's not sovereign, right? Like he's not the one that can decide what can come in and out of his country or who can come in and out of his country. He's not sovereign, but the absurdity of trying to claim in your mind that it's all Donald Trump's fault. And even if it was Donald Trump's fault, which it's not, and I believe most of the Canadian people who understand the issue agree with me, let's just give you that. Let's just say for the sake of argument that that was the situation, though again, it's not. What are you doing about it? Right? Because the problem is that Donald Trump has done it. It's not coming back. So standing here on the street, on the sidelines going, wait, make it reset, turn the clock back, or whatever it is, right? You're not doing anything that's going to alleviate or ameliorate the problem. You're just simply complaining about what has already transpired and how you wished it hadn't happened. You and Mark Carney both sitting there twiddling your thumbs, hoping that everybody will one day in a minute, we're gonna. Well, what are you doing? What have you done? What steps are you taking to solve these problems? Because from where I'm sitting, nothing is being done. Nothing is being accomplished. You're sitting there running around trying to say, oh, poor me, Donald Trump is a big mean meanie. All the while, the people in Canada, all the while, the people in our great nation are falling down the prosperity level to levels unheard of up until now. And you are the one that said that you could solve these problems. You are the one that you two said to the whole population that you were going to get out in front of it. You were going to tackle it. That lady from New Brunswick said she was going to be all over it. So where are the results of what you guys were talking about? Because your words were pretty strong, but your actions are pretty weak. You can let me know what you think down in the comments. I would encourage you to like, comment, subscribe, share this video with all of your friends. I'm going to wrap here. I'll talk to you next time.